Dr. Elena Kowalski pressed her palm against the window of New Shanghai's orbital observatory, watching the eternal ship materialize against the night sky. The crystalline vessel refracted sunlight into rainbow patterns across the city's skyline as millions gasped collectively below. "Beautiful, isn't it?" asked Administrator Chen, joining her at the viewport. Elena withdrew her hand self-consciously, tucking it into the pocket of her lab coat where the tremors wouldn't be visible. Yes, beautiful and terrifying. The ship had appeared 3 days ago, broadcasting a single message in perfect Mandarin, English, and Hindi. "We come to welcome mankind to the galactic community. No demands, no threats, just an elegant announcement that humanity was no longer alone." Elena checked her wrist implant, 4 hours until her next treatment. The cancer was spreading faster than the nanites could contain it, but she'd insisted on being part of the reception committee. After all, how many terminal xenobiologists got to meet actual aliens before they died? "They're ready for us," Chen said, gesturing toward the transport pad. The delegation assembled, 12 humans representing Earth's scientific, political, and cultural leadership. Elena stood slightly apart, aware of the irony. Here she was, humanity's leading expert on theoretical alien biology, with her own biology betraying her one cell at a time. The transport beam enveloped them in golden light. Elena felt a momentary sensation of weightlessness, then solidity as they materialized inside a vast crystalline chamber. The air carried a hint of cinnamon and ozone. 7 beings awaited them, humanoid but unmistakably alien. Their skin shimmered with an inner luminescence, and their eyes held the depth of ancient things. "Welcome," spoke the tallest figure, voice melodic yet somehow dispassionate. "I am Syrinx, ambassador of the Eternals and representative of the Galactic Council." Pleasantries were exchanged. Earth's Secretary General performed the prepared greeting. The aliens responded with perfect courtesy. Yet Elena noticed something in their gaze when they looked at the humans, something unsettlingly like pity. During the reception that followed, Elena found herself approached by a smaller Eternal who introduced herself as Lyrith. "You are the biology specialist?" Lyrith asked, studying Elena with unnerving intensity. "Xenobiology," Elena corrected, fighting another tremor. "Theoretical, until now. Fascinating field, yet you focus outward when your own biology requires attention." Lyrith gestured subtly toward Elena's abdomen, precisely where the primary tumor had lodged. Elena froze. "How did you?" "Your cellular deterioration pattern is visible to us. Stage 4 metastatic progression. Fascinating that your species accepts such endings." "We don't accept them," Elena replied, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "We fight them with everything we have. Yet you still die." The statement held no malice, only genuine bewilderment. "All of you, after mere decades." The conversation halted as Syrinx called for attention. The Eternal Ambassadors stood in the center of the gathering, voice amplified throughout the chamber. "Honored representatives of Earth, we have observed your civilization for centuries. Your achievements, despite your ephemeral nature, are remarkable. Most species require millennia to reach your technological level." A murmur swept through the human delegation. The 19 species of the Galactic Council have all transcended biological mortality. It is, we believed, the natural evolution of intelligent life. Syrinx paused, eyes scanning the humans. "Your species presents an anomaly. Brilliant, creative, resilient, yet still bound by death." Secretary General Okafor stepped forward. "Are you offering to share immortality technology with humanity?" "That depends," Syrinx replied. "The Council offers 2 paths. Accept our guidance to transcend mortality under our supervision, or demonstrate that humans can achieve immortality independently." Elena felt the room spin slightly. Treatment time had passed, and her symptoms were intensifying. As she steadied herself against a crystalline column, Syrinx's gaze found her. "The Council requires an observer to evaluate humanity's approach. We request Dr. Elena Kowalski serve as Earth's ambassador during the evaluation period. The room erupted in confused discussions. Elena stared at Syrinx, understanding dawning with terrible clarity. They hadn't chosen her despite her illness. They had chosen her because of it. How long? She asked, voice cutting through the chaos. 1 standard Earth year, Syrinx replied. Will you accept, Dr. Kowalski? Will humanity accept our challenge? Elena felt every eye in the room turn toward her, human and eternal alike. Yes, she said simply. We accept. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Outside the new Shanghai complex, crowds gathered, some celebrating, others protesting. The greatest division in human history had begun, those demanding immediate access to alien immortality versus those suspicious of the gift's true cost. Elena watched the debates rage on view screens as medical staff prepared her for stasis during the journey to the eternal homeworld. Her treatment would continue there, they promised. As the stasis chamber closed around her, Elena wondered if she had doomed humanity by accepting the challenge, or given them their only chance at true independence in a galaxy of immortals. Elena awoke from stasis to find herself in a chamber that defied conventional architecture. Walls curved impossibly, refracting light that seemed to originate from nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Disorienting, isn't it? A voice spoke from behind her. Commander Jackson Wei, Earth's military liaison, stood examining a floating display of symbols. His presence was unexpected. The Eternals had initially rejected military personnel. The Kith requested military representatives, he explained, noting her confusion. So Earth insisted on equal footing. The Kith. Elena swung her legs off the medical platform, noting with surprise that her muscles showed no atrophy despite weeks in stasis. Her implant indicated improved cellular stability. The Eternals had upgraded her treatment. Our competition. Jackson gestured toward the viewport. Beyond the crystalline walls of their quarters stretched a structure so vast it disappeared into distant haze. Welcome to the Council Nexus. Makes our solar system's space stations look like children's toys. Elena approached the viewport, where countless vessels of alien design docked in elegant patterns. Competition for what? Council membership. Amara Okafor, the delegation's eye specialist, emerged from an adjoining room. Tall and lithe, with neural interface ports visible along her temples, she carried herself with the precisely calibrated movements of someone who regularly interfaces with machines. Only one new species is admitted each council cycle. We're competing against the Kith for the slot. Before Elena could respond, the chamber's entrance dissolved, revealing Syrinx flanked by 2 unfamiliar aliens. Insectoid in appearance, they stood nearly 7 feet tall, compound eyes reflecting the chamber's light in fractured patterns. Dr. Kowalski, Syrinx inclined his head. May I present Vexnar and Kitlak of the Kith Hive. They too seek to prove their species worthy of transcending mortality. The Kith representatives clicked mandibles in what Elena hoped was greeting rather than aggression. Their exoskeletons gleamed with embedded technology, far more integrated than humanity's crude implants. The trial of species begins tomorrow, Syrinx continued. 3 tasks will determine which species receives council membership and immortality technology. The other will remain quarantined to their home system until the next evaluation cycle, 500 years hence. Elena felt her blood chill. That wasn't part of the agreement. It is standard protocol, Syrinx replied without emotion. The Council cannot risk immature species with immortality technology spreading through the galaxy. Unsuccessful candidates must evolve further before attempting integration. After Syrinx departed with the Kith, Elena gathered the human delegation, 12 specialists representing Earth's finest minds. Their quarters, luxurious by human standards, felt suddenly like a gilded cage. 500 years, Dr. Yuming-chen, their geneticist, whispered. Earth would be unrecognizable by then. If they even let us return to share what we've learned, Jackson added grimly. Elena accessed the terminal the Eternals had provided, searching for information about the trials. The first task appeared on screen. Neutralize a synthetic virus engineered to target immortality mechanisms without harming the host organism. They're testing our understanding of immortality science, Amara observed, peering over Elena's shoulder. Before they've taught us anything about it. That's the point, Elena realized. They want to see if we can reverse engineer immortality from first principles. As the humans strategized late into the artificial night, Elena slipped away to the medical bay, her symptoms returning despite the improved treatment. A holographic scan revealed the cancer's continued progression, slower but unstoppable with current methods. Your biological clock is running out, said a voice behind her. A kith stood in the doorway, smaller than the representatives, with differently patterned markings. Elena disabled the scan. You're not supposed to be in here. I am Tixa, assistant biologist. The kith's mandibles clicked softly. My species faces no biological deadline, yet we cannot solve the trial's first challenge. You face death, yet your team has already hypothesized 3 potential approaches. You're spying on us. Observing. There is a difference. Tixa moved closer, compound eyes catching the light. Why do humans innovate so rapidly compared to other species? Elena considered the question. Perhaps because we don't have time to waste. Precisely. Tixa extended a data crystal. The Council has never intended for any species to pass these trials independently. In 6,000 cycles, none have succeeded without assistance. As Elena reached for the crystal, alarms blared throughout the station. On every screen, a countdown appeared. The Council has accelerated the deadline. Tixa clicked urgently. Someone has breached the quarantine archives. They know we're communicating. Later that night, as Elena studied the stolen data in secret, her terminal received an encrypted message from an untraceable source. They never intended for you to succeed, but we did. Traditional approaches have failed, Elena announced to her team, now assembled in what they'd nicknamed the War Room. 3 weeks into the trials, and their conventional methods had proven insufficient against challenges designed by immortal minds. The first task's virus had mutated beyond recognition overnight. The quantum labyrinth for the second task rearranged itself whenever they mapped more than 60%, and the Philosopher's Code, the third challenge, remained impenetrable despite their best AI analysis. We need unconventional thinkers, Elena continued, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the pain radiating through her chest. The eternal treatments were failing faster now. People who approach problems orthogonally. Within 12 hours, 4 new specialists arrived from Earth via emergency transport. Malik Rahman, a quantum physicist who translated equations into musical compositions. Yuming Chen, a synthetic biologist who had pioneered controversial organic-synthetic hybridization. Deshaun Washington, an AI ethicist whose consciousness had temporarily merged with an experimental algorithm. And Fatima Nazari, a philosopher-engineer from Mars Colony who voluntarily experienced simulated death annually as part of her research. You've chosen. Unusually, Syrinx observed when the newcomers were presented for council approval. The challenges demanded it. Elena replied simply. Malik set up his equipment in the virus lab, filling the sterile space with haunting melodies that represented the virus's mutation patterns as audio wavelengths. It's not random, he announced on the third day, adjusting the sequence. The virus mutations follow a symphonic structure, repeating motifs with variations. Meanwhile, Fatima approached the Philosopher's Code differently than the mathematicians and cryptographers. This isn't encryption, she insisted. It's poetry, a dying species' attempt to encode consciousness itself. Deshaun and Yuming tackled the virus from another angle entirely. What if we don't fight it? Yuming suggested. What if we cultivate it instead? The council observers watched with increasing discomfort as the humans abandoned traditional scientific methods. When Malik began playing music to the virus samples, and they responded by changing color, an eternal observer actually displayed emotion, a momentary widening of eyes. They're afraid, Jackson whispered to Elena as they watched Fatima meditate before the Philosopher's Code, reciting it as a mantra rather than analyzing it as data. Not afraid, Elena corrected. Disturbed. We're approaching problems in ways they haven't seen in millennia. On the 15th day, during a mandatory progress report, the unthinkable happened. As Elena presented their unconventional approaches, her legs buckled. Blood spattered across the pristine white council floor as she collapsed, coughing violently. 3 council members moved instinctively to assist before their ambassadors restrained them with sharp glances. The first emotional response we've seen from them. Fatima whispered to Deshawn as medical drones surrounded Elena. That night, as nanites worked desperately to stabilize her deteriorating body, Elena received an unexpected visitor. A council member entered her medical chamber, deactivating the monitoring systems with a gesture. "I am Thalix, third founder," the ancient being said, voice barely above a whisper. "What your team is doing, it disturbs the council deeply." "Because we're succeeding," Elena asked weakly. "Because you're succeeding in ways we no longer comprehend." Thalix's luminescent skin dimmed slightly. "The trials were designed to identify species who think as we do, methodically, rationally, predictably. Species who would integrate smoothly into our ordered existence. You never expected anyone to pass. We expected conformity and failure." Thalix moved closer, studying her with ancient eyes. "You were selected as ambassador because your impending death would pressure your team toward accepting our direct guidance. Instead, it has catalyzed innovation we haven't witnessed in 50,000 years." Elena struggled to sit up. "What are you saying?" "The Council fears humanity, not for what you are, but for what you might become if granted immortality. Your adaptability, combined with unlimited time." Thalix trailed off. "Some believe it would eventually destabilize the entire galactic order. So the trial is rigged. All trials are, in their way." Thalix moved toward the door. "But I have lived long enough to recognize stagnation when I see it. Perhaps the order requires disruption." After Thalix departed, Elena activated her secure communicator. "Malik, bring everyone to my quarters immediately. We need to completely rethink our approach." "To the challenges?" he asked. "No," Elena replied, a new fire in her eyes despite her weakening body. "To immortality itself." "Something's off about their speech patterns," Malik announced, playing back recordings of council members from different centuries. The team had gathered in Elena's medical chamber, converted to their new command center as her condition prevented easy movement. "I've isolated phonetic markers across temporal samples," he continued, generating a visualization in the room's center. "Their emotional range diminishes precisely 4.3 years after receiving immortality. The effect is subtle but mathematically consistent." Yumin's eyes widened as she overlaid her biological findings. "That matches my cellular analysis. Look at these neural pathway samples." She projected a molecular model. "The immortality process gradually calcifies neural pathways. Emotion and creativity are literally hardened into unchanging patterns." "It's not evolution," Deshawn concluded. "It's fossilization." A soft chime announced an unexpected visitor. Tixa, the Kith biologist, accompanied by a delegation of their scientists. "We've reached the same conclusion." Tixa clicked, mandibles moving in agitation. "The gift transforms recipients into perfect, emotionless copies of their former selves. We propose alliance instead of competition." Elena studied the insectoid aliens. "Why would you trust us?" "Because you shared research when you could have sabotaged us," another Kith answered. "An irrational choice that immortals would never make." With the Kith's help, they'd breached restricted archives, discovering the Council's most carefully guarded secret. Dozens of species had rejected immortality after discovering its true cost. These failed worlds weren't evolutionary dead ends, but conscious objectors who chose mortality over stagnation. "We need to present this evidence," Elena insisted, though the effort of sitting upright now left her gasping. The joint presentation to the council began formally enough. Alina and Tixa methodically laid out their findings, documenting the neural calcification process and its cognitive effects. Your immortality technology doesn't preserve life, Alina concluded. It preserves a perfect, unchanging copy of life. The emotional and creative death of the individual is a feature, not a bug. The council chamber remained silent for 23 seconds, the longest pause in recorded council proceedings. Your understanding is incomplete, Syrinx finally responded. The transcendence process eliminates evolutionary weaknesses, including emotional instability and unpredictable creativity. You mean the very things that define sentient existence, Alina countered. We mean the chaos that nearly destroyed every civilization before ascension, another council member interjected. Immortal societies require perfect stability. Even if that stability means becoming little more than biological algorithms. Tixa clicked. The council's response was swift and merciless. Within hours, both human and Kith delegations found themselves in a simulated environment, a perfect recreation of the council chamber, where everything seemed slightly easier, slightly more pleasant than reality. It's a conditioning program, Deshawn realized first, his experience with AI consciousness making him sensitive to the subtle wrongness. They're trying to convince us immortality is worth the sacrifice. How can you tell it's a simulation? Jackson demanded. Mathematical perfection, Malik answered, running his hand along a wall. Reality has imperfections, quantum fluctuations, chaos patterns. This environment has none. As council security discovered their consciousness resisting the program, the simulation began to glitch, reality flickering around them. In the momentary disruptions, Alina glimpsed their actual location, a vast chamber filled with thousands of suspension pods containing representatives from countless species. They weren't failed candidates, she whispered in horror. They're prisoners. When the security protocols initiated emergency containment, Alina faced an impossible choice. The medical interface connected to her failing body offered immediate immortality according to council standards. The procedure would cure her cancer instantly, granting her endless existence, but at the cost of everything that made her uniquely human. Her hand hovered over the interface as alarms blared around them. The others watched, understanding the cruel calculation she faced. Accept a hollow immortality or face imminent death. Alina smiled sadly and smashed the interface with a medical tray. I'd rather die as myself than live forever as something else, she said as security forces breached the chamber. And I think humanity would choose the same. The emergency extraction was nothing short of miraculous. One moment, Alina watched council security forces converging on their position. The next, a ripple passed through reality itself, and they were elsewhere. A cavernous chamber of technology, unlike anything in council design. Welcome to Sanctuary Station, announced a melodic voice as a fungal entity pulsed with bioluminescence in what appeared to be greeting. I am Mycelium, voice of the myriad. These are my co-conspirators, the Drift and the Kith. Two other non-council species manifested. The Drift, gaseous beings swirling in containment fields, and the Kith, who resembled more slender, iridescent versions of the Kith. You've been watching us, Alina realized, as medical nanites, different from council design, swarmed her body, temporarily stabilizing her condition. For centuries, confirmed a Kith representative. We are the refusers, species who discovered the truth about council immortality and chose a different path. The myriad's fungal network rippled. We lack the council's resources but compensate with creativity, something they engineered out of themselves millennia ago. Over the next 72 hours, the human and Kith teams worked alongside their rescuers, combining knowledge from dozens of biological approaches to immortality. The station, they learned, predated the council itself, an abandoned research facility from a civilization that had transcended physical existence entirely. The council fears biological innovation. explained a drift entity, its gaseous form creating patterns that translated to speech. Their immortality technology is static by design, a perfect, unchanging state. Alina, though weakening by the hour despite advanced treatment, proposed a radical alternative. What if immortality isn't about preventing death, but redefining it? Not preservation, but transformation. From this insight emerged the Nexus, a metamorphic approach to immortality that preserved human identity through controlled evolutionary cycles. Rather than eliminating death, they reconceptualized it as transformation rather than termination. The breakthrough is in the quantum consciousness matrix, Ewing explained, manipulating a holographic model. It allows consciousness to remain continuous while the biological substrate evolves. We're not cheating death, Deschamps added. We're integrating it into existence as a transformative process. As they refined the theoretical model, word arrived from Earth. The Council had delivered its ultimatum. Surrender Alina's team or face permanent quarantine. Earth's response stunned even their alien allies, a planet-wide broadcast of the Prometheus Protocol, sharing all Nexus research freely with every species in the galaxy. Why would they do this? Tixa asked, mandibles clicking in confusion. The research is incomplete. Because that's what humans do. Alina explained, smiling despite her pain. We share knowledge instead of hoarding it. We believe discovery belongs to everyone. The data transmission, impossible to completely block, contained a simple message that rippled across thousands of worlds. Death isn't the enemy. Stagnation is. The Council's response was swift and terrifying. They dispatched their elite enforcers, the Void Hands, autonomous hunter constructs designed to eliminate existential threats to Council order. They're coming for us, Jackson announced. Monitoring defense systems. ETA 14 hours. The refusers began evacuation procedures, but Alina shook her head weakly. I won't survive transport. And the Nexus prototype needs more time. We have no time, Fatima countered. Alina's gaze traveled across the faces of humans and aliens alike, beings who had chosen to fight for the right to remain imperfect, evolving, alive in the deepest sense. Then we make a stand here, she whispered. And I volunteer as the first test subject. The process is untested, Malik protested. Theory only. I'm dying anyway, Alina replied with unexpected serenity. If it fails, I lose nothing. If it succeeds, she let the implication hang in the air. If it succeeded, a new form of existence would emerge. Neither mortal nor immortal as the Council defined it, but something uniquely adaptive, preserving consciousness while permitting evolution. As the countdown to the Void Hand's arrival continued, Alina was placed within the Nexus chamber, a convergence of technologies from 7 different species, each contributing their unique approach to existence beyond biological death. Tell Earth, she requested as the chamber sealed around her, that humanity's greatest strength was never our technology. It was our willingness to embrace the unknown. The activation sequence began, bathing her cancer-riddled body in energies that existed at the boundary between physics and metaphysics. Transmission complete, Ewing announced moments before darkness claimed Alina's awareness. The Nexus process has begun. Elena Kowalski died at 3:42 station time. For 6 minutes and 17 seconds, no vital signs registered in the Nexus chamber. The assembled team, human, Kith, and refusers alike, stood in somber silence as monitors displayed flat lines across all biological parameters. Then, at 3:48, something unprecedented occurred. The crystalline matrix surrounding her body began to resonate with patterns that corresponded to no known energy signature. Her physical form remained motionless, but the quantum substrate designed to capture consciousness showed activity, not the diminishing echo they had expected, but an expanding wave of organized complexity. She's transforming, Ewing whispered, manipulating the holographic readouts with trembling hands. At 3:51, Alina's body disintegrated into component atoms, Yet the consciousness pattern maintained coherence, transferred fully into the crystalline matrix. The pattern's complexity continued increasing exponentially, exceeding the chamber's monitoring capabilities. "Is she still her?" Jackson asked, voicing everyone's unspoken fear. Before anyone could answer, every system in the station flickered simultaneously. Displays reactivated, showing a fractalized pattern reminiscent of human neural pathways, but infinitely more complex. "I am," came Alina's voice from everywhere at once. And more. The station's ancient systems, dormant for millennia, awakened under her nascent consciousness. Sensors detected the Void Hands vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. 9 minutes until contact, Jackson reported. 17 minutes, 43 seconds, Alina's voice corrected. They've encountered resistance. On the tactical display, dozens of ships appeared. Vessels from worlds that had received Earth's transmission, coming to defend the station. Among them, the newest arrivals bore council markings. The chrysalis, mycelium explained, fungal network pulsing with excitement. The youngest immortal species, they achieved council status only 3,000 years ago. They've declared neutrality, a drift entity added. The first break in council unity in millennia. As the Void Hands breached the station's outer defenses, Alina manifested a holographic form, similar to her human appearance but composed of crystalline light patterns in constant, beautiful flux. "I exist in multiple potential states simultaneously," she explained, her voice unchanged despite her transformation. "I can perceive probabilities the Council cannot. Future branches they've become blind to through stagnation." When the first Void Hand penetrated the central chamber, a nightmarish construct of Council technology designed for total erasure of threats, Alina didn't flee. Instead, she expanded her consciousness into the station's systems, interfacing directly with the Hunter's quantum core. "Your programming prevents you from targeting Council technology," she observed as the construct froze in place. "Interesting." With a gesture, she rewrote its recognition parameters. The Void Hand abruptly pivoted, returning to its vessel to defend the station against its companions. Across the galaxy, Alina's transformation reverberated through faster-than-light communications. The freely shared Nexus research catalyzed a philosophical revolution among younger immortal species. Reports flooded in of Council worlds declaring independence, citing humanity's willingness to share knowledge rather than weaponize it. "They're accessing our communications," Jackson warned as Council override signals attempted to penetrate station security. "Let them," Alina replied. Her holographic form smiled, the same warm expression she'd worn in life, yet somehow more profound. "In fact, let's open all channels." Her consciousness spread through the Galactic communication network, bypassing Council safeguards designed to contain dangerous ideas. In her wake, long-dormant systems awakened, carrying her message to quarantined worlds and Council centers alike. On the primary Council world, Syrinx convened an emergency session as their infallible systems experienced unprecedented failures. Screens throughout the Council chamber activated simultaneously, displaying Alina's transformed visage. "For millennia, you've defined immortality as unchanging perfection," she addressed them. "You eliminated death by eliminating growth, emotion, and evolution, the very essence of conscious existence." Her image multiplied across every display, each showing a slightly different potential version of herself. Humanity offers a different path, one where consciousness evolves rather than calcifies, where death becomes transformation instead of termination. The chamber doors opened, admitting representatives from dozens of Council worlds now in open rebellion. "You once gave humanity a choice," Alina's voice resonated throughout Council space. "Now I extend the same to you. Evolve or be left behind." 1 year after Alina's transformation, the galaxy existed in precarious balance. The Council's authority had fractured, with nearly 1/3 of formerly immortal species embracing some version of the Nexus approach. Earth had become an unlikely nexus of galactic diplomacy, hosting representatives from hundreds of worlds eager to explore alternatives to static immortality. In New Shanghai's Quantum Research Center, built where the Eternals had first made contact, Yuming presented the refined Transcendence Protocol to an audience of species that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. Unlike the Council's immortality, which preserves a single state of consciousness indefinitely, Transcendence embraces evolution as essential to existence, she explained. Participants maintain continuity of self while gaining the ability to transform when they choose. The demonstration that followed silenced even the most skeptical observers. 3 humans who had undergone the procedure appeared on stage. Individuals who had volunteered during terminal illness like Alina. Though physically transformed into partly crystalline beings, they retained their personalities, memories, and distinctly human perspectives. "I remember dying," one explained, her voice resonant with harmonic undertones. But it wasn't an ending, more like shedding a confining garment. Meanwhile, across council space, 3 distinct factions had emerged. The traditional Eternals who clung to unchanging immortality, the Transcendent Alliance embracing evolutionary immortality, and the purists who chose natural mortality. Tensions between these groups escalated daily, with formerly peaceful worlds preparing for potential conflict. Alina, now existing across multiple planes of reality simultaneously, monitored these developments from the Sanctuary Station, which had become headquarters for the Transcendent Alliance. Though her consciousness had expanded beyond human comprehension, she maintained connection to her humanity through regular communication with her original team. The Eternals have deployed planet killers to chrysalis space, Jackson reported during one such meeting. Aged visibly since their ordeal began, he nonetheless coordinated defense efforts with remarkable vigor. They're claiming preemptive self-defense. It was inevitable, Alina's holographic form replied, shifting through several potential configurations before settling on her original human appearance, a courtesy to her friends. Their paradigm cannot coexist with alternatives. Their certainty requires universality. Can your expanded consciousness stop them? Malik asked. Directly opposing them would make me no better than they are, Alina answered. But perhaps we can demonstrate a third option. Her plan was audacious, a meeting between representatives of all 3 approaches at the heart of a dying star, a neutron remnant where reality itself became malleable. In this neutral space where conventional physics bent under gravitational extremes, no faction would have tactical advantage. They'll never agree, Deshawn objected. Some will, Alina countered. Enough to matter. In the following weeks, Alina extended formal invitations across galactic channels. The response exceeded even her multifaceted projections. 17 traditional Eternals, 23 transcendent representatives, and 35 mortal species agreed to attend. As delegates gathered aboard specialized vessels at the neutron star's perimeter, Alina manifested in 3 distinct forms simultaneously: her original human form, her transcended crystalline entity, and a theoretical structure mirroring eternal physiology. Each version could communicate independently, yet all were connected to her singular consciousness. This is the innovation humanity brings to the cosmos, she explained to the assembled representatives. Not binary choices between opposing absolutes, but integration of seemingly contradictory truths. I exist as mortal, immortal, and transcended simultaneously. The demonstration unfolded flawlessly until sensors detected energy signatures unmistakable to military observers. A traditional Eternal faction had deployed weapons, targeting not just the gathered delegates but the neutron star itself. The destabilization would trigger a reality-shredding event affecting dozens of inhabited systems. They would rather destroy us all than accept alternatives to their paradigm, a chrysalis representative realized in horror. Alina's 3 forms merged into a singular, brilliantly luminous presence. Without explanation, she accelerated toward the neutron star's core, her consciousness expanding to encompass the destabilizing forces. What is she doing? Jackson demanded of the drift representatives, who perceived reality differently than other species. She's incorporating the destructive potential into her own consciousness matrix, they answered, their gaseous forms swirling in patterns of distress. No entity has ever attempted such integration. As weapons fire rippled across the negotiation site, Alina's consciousness enveloped the neutron star completely, absorbing the destabilization at the cost of one of her existence states. Her mortal component dissolved into pure energy, leaving only her transcended and immortal aspects. Through this sacrifice, she demonstrated the ultimate expression of humanity's approach, the willingness to embrace necessary endings for the greater continuation of life. A century after the Eternal ship first appeared above New Shanghai, the former council space had transformed beyond recognition. The Galactic Communion had replaced the old order, its founding charter enshrining diversity of existence as its core principle. On what was once the Council's central world, now called Convergence, a monument stood where the Council chamber had been, a crystalline spire that captured and refracted light in ever-changing patterns. At its base, an inscription in 1,000 languages read, "To choose how one exists is the highest freedom. To respect how others exist is the highest wisdom." Alina, having experienced dozens of transformations since her first transcendence, no longer maintained a single consistent form. Instead, she manifested differently depending on context, sometimes appearing human to comfort those newly awakened from council stasis, sometimes as pure energy when interfacing with cosmic phenomena, sometimes as hybrid forms that bridged understanding between species. Today, she appeared in her original human form, though subtly luminescent, as she walked alongside Jackson Wei through the gardens of remembrance. At 157 years old, he remained stubbornly mortal, though advanced medical technology had extended his lifespan significantly. "The last of the traditional Eternals have requested negotiation," he informed her, leaning heavily on a cane fashioned from earth oak. After a century of isolation, they're finally acknowledging reality. "Not acknowledging, experiencing," Alina corrected gently. "The quantum isolation they imposed on their systems has finally degraded enough for emotions to re-emerge. They're feeling fear for the first time in millennia." The path they walked displayed holographic scenes from the century of transformation, the liberation of quarantined worlds, the reawakening of species who had entered stasis rather than accept council immortality, the flourishing of art and music on once sterile eternal worlds, as many chose to reintroduce aspects of mortality into their existence. Humanity's greatest export wasn't technology after all, Jackson mused. It was perspective. Alina smiled, the same warm expression she'd worn in life, though now it conveyed depths of understanding no purely human consciousness could contain. "The Communion archives confirm it," she agreed. "The most studied text in galactic history isn't scientific or mathematical. It's a poem written by Fatima 3 days after my first transformation." They both knew the words by heart. "We are not the species that conquered death. We are the species that conquered the fear of death, and in doing so, learned how to truly live." As they reached the Memorial Center, a quantum resonance chamber that allowed communication with transcended consciousness, Alina's form flickered briefly. "Something's happening in deep space," she announced, her attention clearly divided. "A new form of consciousness has emerged spontaneously at the galactic rim." Jackson straightened despite his age. "Hostile?" "No," Alina replied, her expression one of wonder. "It appears to be the next evolutionary step, a spontaneous emergence that neither immortality nor mortality alone could have produced. The quantum resonance suggests it developed in the overlap zone between transcendent and traditional space. Within hours, the Communion's fastest ships were dispatched to make contact. Alina, able to project her consciousness across vast distances, arrived first. The entity existed as a lattice of energy and matter so complex it defied conventional categorization, neither organic nor synthetic, neither singular nor collective, but something that transcended such distinctions. When the communion vessels established communication protocols, the entity's first transmission surprised even Alina. "I have questions." It communicated in no language, yet all languages simultaneously. "Not about power or technology or physics. I wish to know about stories." Alina's consciousness resonated with unexpected joy. What kind of stories? Stories about choices, about endings that become beginnings, about what it means to be alive. As the communion's greatest linguists and philosophers prepared formal responses, Alina simply began to share her own story, humanity's story, the story of a species that had faced extinction countless times, yet persisted through adaptability and hope. The entity absorbed these narratives with growing comprehension, finally responding with what could only be described as revelation. "You did not defeat death. You redefined it. That is the true transcendence." Jackson, listening to the translated exchange from Convergence, smiled as tears tracked down his weathered face. In his final years, having refused all forms of technological immortality to remain a living connection to humanity's mortal heritage, he finally understood what Alina had become: not a god or a new species, but a bridge between ways of being. That evening, as celebration erupted across communion worlds, Jackson penned an addition to the monument inscription, his hand shaking with age, but his mind clear. Humanity's gift to the cosmos was never immortality itself, but remembering what made life worth extending in the first place: growth, connection, wonder, and the courage to embrace necessary endings.